Before you pick a neighborhood in Atlanta, you need to know these things. First of all, you need to know that Atlanta and the metro Atlanta area are very spread out. This is not a compact city where you're going to easily be able to walk to everything. And so there are certainly different parts of the metro Atlanta area. And when you're picking a neighborhood, you want to pick one that is in the right area that fits your style. For example, the middle of Atlanta is going to be much more densely populated, and it's going to be easy to walk around to the different things that you need throughout the day. But the suburbs of Atlanta are going to be a lot more spread out, and you're going to be car dependent. And so if you're looking for an area where you can easily walk to all of the things, then you might want to avoid the suburbs, with a few exceptions that we're going to talk about. And then not only is everything spread out, but this is also going to affect how your commute to work is going to be impacted. What's up, y'all? My name is Victor with Atlanta Suburban Living, and we put out videos every week about what it's like to live in Atlanta and the surrounding suburbs. But if you are living in one suburb, like maybe Marietta or Alpharetta, and your work is in the middle of Atlanta, maybe Midtown, that commute is going to be very much affected by rush hour traffic. But what you need to understand is that the distance between your home and your commute to work is not nearly as important as the amount of time that you're going to spend from home to work. For example, if you lived in Marietta and drove to Midtown during rush hour, that may take you an hour and a half. But if you lived in Midtown and drove to Marietta for work, the same distance, but it would actually be closer to 45 minutes commute to work. And so that distance is very much affected by which direction you're going and which roads you're using. And so the neighborhood that you pick really should be a big factor for that is going to be how you're going to get to work, what roads you're going to use. And you want to try to avoid those trafficy rush hour roads as much as possible. And then not only does each city have a specific way that is affected by the rush hour traffic, but each city is also very different. Remember that there are about 100 city suburbs all around Atlanta. And so each one of these suburbs is very different cost of living, different lifestyle. The schools are very different. And we're going to talk about all of these things in this video to make sure that you pick the right neighborhood. But that's certainly something that you need to keep in mind. For example, in Buckhead, the cost of living is very different than in Dallas, Georgia. So if you are going to be living in Dallas, you would definitely need a vehicle. You would absolutely be car dependent. But in Buckhead, you would not be car dependent. So that cost of living expense is going to be very different in those two things. Conversely, the cost of a home in Buckhead is going to be significantly higher than a cost of a home in Dallas, Georgia. And so these two cities, while they are both in Metro Atlanta, have a very different cost of living. Of course, if you're thinking about moving to any one of these areas and need help kind of figuring out which one of the areas is right for you, feel free to call, text, or email me anytime. I'm happy to discuss these kinds of different factors and make sure that we find the right neighborhood for you. Thank you so much to everybody who has reached out. I'm always happy to help. Another important question that you need to ask yourself when picking the right neighborhood in Metro Atlanta is what kind of lifestyle you're looking for. Because again, each one of these suburbs is going to have a different feeling lifestyle. Comes to lifestyle, it's going to be very different in each one of these suburbs. Of course, in the middle of Atlanta, you're going to have that kind of city feel, that city lifestyle. But in the suburbs of Atlanta, you're going to be more of a quiet, kind of maybe family-friendly kind of atmosphere. You're not going to really find that family-friendly atmosphere in too many places in the center of Atlanta, but in the far outskirts, like family-friendly suburbs of Atlanta, this is going to be a much safer area. The schools are going to be better. And so different kind of lifestyle in each one of these. And then of course you could be even farther out, like in the rural, like super country part of Georgia, and this is going to be like very quiet living. You can get, 5 to 10 acres of land for your home, and maybe you are doing some kind of farming or chickens or gardening and all of these things. You're certainly not going to be able to do that in Buckhead or in the middle of Atlanta. But if you're really far out in the country, this is a very much a different kind of lifestyle. And then speaking of schools, this is definitely going to vary significantly from suburb to suburb. In general, the suburbs that are on the south side of Atlanta tend to not have as good of public school ratings according to greatschools.org or niche.com. There are a few exceptions on the south side: Fayetteville, Georgia, Peachtree City, Georgia. These are some of my favorites when it comes to the school ratings. And then on the north part of Metro Atlanta, they tend to have a bit better school ratings. And it's a very small difference. I don't mean to say that the south side is like absolutely the worst and you need to stay away from it. That's not what I am trying to say here. I just mean that the northern suburbs of Atlanta tend to have a bit better school ratings. Cities like Alpharetta or Johns Creek or East Cobb, also Gwinnett County, these are known for having like some of the best public schools in all of Georgia. But very often we see a trade-off when it comes to the school ratings and the walkability of these areas. And the more densely populated, easily walkable parts of Atlanta, these school ratings don't tend to be as good as the family-friendly suburbs where you are going to be car dependent and it's not too easy to walk. Now, one thing to note here is that each one of these suburbs, Marietta or Alpharetta or Woodstock or whatever, all of these suburbs that are in the family-friendly areas with the good schools, they almost all have this city center, like a downtown area where you find kind of a concentrated area or concentrated like commercial areas. So those city centers are easily walkable. And if you lived within a mile or so, or however far you're willing to walk of those downtown areas, then it would be easily walkable. But outside of those city centers, you would certainly be car dependent. And then of course, safety and crime is a big one when you're trying to find a family friendly suburb. The safety is a very big issue for many people. There are many sources online for being able to find which cities and which suburbs have certain crime rates. And so this is certainly something that you can find a lot of information on online. If you Google crime rates in the city of Atlanta, actually, if you Google crime rates in the city of Atlanta, you're going to get a lot of negative news. So actually, let's talk about that, because you have to remember that the news is all about the negative things. This is what people watch. This is what people click on. And so they love to portray all of the bad things that are happening in Atlanta. And while there are certainly parts of Atlanta that I would caution you to stay away from because of the crime rates, not all of Atlanta is terrible. And it's certainly an area where I feel safe enough to walk around with my family. It's not like you gotta be on guard all the time when you're in Atlanta. In general, this is a safe city, especially if you are even farther out, like in the suburbs of Atlanta. The crime rates tend to be a little lower than in the city of Atlanta, but there are plenty of neighborhoods within the middle of Atlanta that are absolutely safe areas. Another big factor when picking the right neighborhood is going to be what kind of future developments are happening in these areas. If you're wanting to be in an area where there's no construction and you want it to be super peaceful and quiet, then you might want to be in certain parts of this Metro Atlanta area, like middle of Marietta. These areas that have already been developed aren't seeing a lot of new construction. So like Marietta or maybe Roswell or Norcross, these areas that are closer to the city of Atlanta tend to get less new construction, new developments, but it's the suburbs that are farther away from Atlanta. Swanee has a bunch of new development going on there. Woodstock for sure has always got something going on. Canton, they've always got some things. And so those cities, if you look on the map, you'll notice that they are farther out from Metro Atlanta. And it's because it's that outer band of the Metro Atlanta area that is experiencing the most amount of growth. And so they're seeing a lot of new construction homes, but also new construction when it comes to commercial areas as well. And so that outer band of Metro Atlanta tends to have the most amount of new development. And then of course, when you're picking the right neighborhood, you want to make sure that you're working with someone who is aware of these different kinds of suburbs and who understands these suburbs. And actually even more important than that is being able to explain these different suburbs to someone from out of state or out of the country. I know many of our viewers come from California or Florida or New York. And so there are certainly some differences about the suburbs of Metro Atlanta that are need to be communicated differently if you're not from Georgia. Like there's some things about the culture and the vibe of Georgia that are kind of understood already among Georgians, but there's obviously some parts about living in Georgia that are not commonly understood if you live in California. So these kinds of things need to be expressed and communicated clearly. So working with an expert who understands what it's like relocating from another state is definitely going to be very important when picking the right neighborhood. But without a doubt, one of the biggest factors for whether or not you move to Metro Atlanta is going to be the cost of living here. While Atlanta is not the least expensive place to live in the country, it still is a bit less expensive than some of the major US cities. In fact, I've made an entire video where I outlined the monthly costs of living in Atlanta. You can check it out right here. I'll see you in the next one.